All right, so we're on now. So we're going to pull the Joe Rogan style podcast. We're just going to skip an intro and get right to it.
I
But
love that.
no,
Let,
what you're saying is
organic,
100%
natural,
accurate.
yeah.
Yeah. Like, okay, so now continue the thought you were
Well,
saying.
let's start from
So
the
what
top. Start from the top, David. Yep.
from the
Yep.
top, I mean, we were just discussing the fact that integrating an individual to mentor within the system or the program that you have and it's almost impossible, right? Because the
Yep.
reality is there is so much responsibility that comes with what we do. I
Hmm.
mean, so much. I mean, the mentorship, the guidance that we're providing, especially working with kids, right? To me, that's the greatest blessing of all. Having one, they have the greatest potential for neuroplasticity, right? But and they're sponges, and they're looking for that guidance and to be shaped, and the tools that you provide them, the mentorship that you provide them, the wisdom, the guidance, that's going to stay with them the rest of their lives,
Yeah.
right? And so if you're to integrate someone, that comes with such a tremendous amount of responsibility, and as it should come with a tremendous amount of expectations and standards attached to it, and they have to embody whatever it is you're trying to put out there in this universe, right? And if they don't embody it themselves, then they're doing a disservice to the program, the system, whatever you want to call it, and to the that canvas that you're giving them an opportunity to paint on, and those are the youth, right? The kids that are looking for that guidance, and if the person that they're receiving guidance from doesn't live it and embody it themselves, doesn't speak from experience, then it's very difficult to then have the impact that we're looking to
Something gets
have.
lost in the message. There's
No,
no
no. I
doubt.
mean, I mean, there's a complete, discrepancy in the message that's being sent,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
And it's
yeah. And in our industry, there's already such a high turnover rate as it is, and such a lack of professionalism because the barrier to entry is so low in our fields. But then you add on top of that really the complexity of our systems that we use, and the attention to detail and the mindset that it does require. And I agree with you. I've definitely found it's been very difficult to find individuals who are willing and capable to show that level of commitment to learn that system, to be able to communicate the right way, and because it's a lot more than just holding position.
Yeah.
There's more that goes into it than that. Anybody can teach
no,
somebody how to do an isometric. There's more to it than that.
even more so than that. I mean, I've had meetings with practitioners, the doctors, therapists, you name it, and they'll ask me about the program, the system, the integration of the devices, right? And the simplest thing I can ask right from the jump is, how much experience do you have yourself, right? Uh, Experimenting it, incorporating it. How much do you use it? How much do you embody it, right? Is it part of your daily routine and lifestyle? Have you overcome something with it, right? Have you used it to treat injuries on yourself? Have you used it to elevate yourself to new levels of performance, heightened performance in whatever, however you choose to display it, right? In your practice, right? As a husband, as a boyfriend, as a father, as a business professional, right? Because the objective, right, in reality is, who gives a fuck, excuse my language, about, you know, your how much you squat in the weight room if it doesn't transfer to the field of play, or if it doesn't transfer to the field of business, or if it doesn't transfer into your life as a as the leader of your pack, as the leader of your family, right? As the leader of your community, within your village, within your community, within your state, within your platform that you're trying to get information, you know, out there to people, for people to learn and gather information, improve themselves, come to you for enhancement, however it may be. if you're not living it, breathing it, embodying it, then you're a phony, plain and simple. You're a phony. And the reality is, in today's day and age, now more so than ever, anyone with an iPhone can literally video content and put it out there and call themselves an expert,
Yeah.
and they're showing small fragments of whatever exercise or activity or application of it, and putting it out there for people to follow and incorporate themselves, but they themselves don't incorporate it. They don't know what happens after 10, 20, 30, 100 applications of it. They don't understand what happens in this circumstance and in that circumstance with all these different variables that go into it. And if they don't have an understanding of what type of reactions and responses take place within all possible settings, right? And obviously, we're humans and we're imperfect. And, there's going to be varying degrees of discrepancy along the way. But the reality is, if you didn't even put forth the effort to have a greater understanding and embody it, and I keep referencing the embodiment because that's so critical in it, then how are you going to get the most out of your business? And you guys got me or no?
There you go. You're cutting out, but I think
Yeah, I'm
let's
sorry.
see. It was
Yeah, I
Are
think
we
we
back?
salvaged it.
updated.
Yep.
Nothing you
Yeah.
got to do.
Okay.
Just leave it.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, I think
All
you're
right.
good
Good.
there. Well, I kind of lost what you had to say there, but I know where you were when we kind of cut you off, and I agree, and I think it's challenging. I think that's probably part of the reason that people that have tried to implement our systems have failed or not been successful. But there's just more to it, and if you haven't been through that, then again, I agree, you're a phony. But let's uh let's talk about that now in your transition with System X now. So tell me a little bit about System X, man.
Well, System X is the exponential multiplier to all things. You guys lose me again?
Yeah, we're losing you again.
All right. Are we back?
Yeah, we're good. I think it's something on your internet end,
It
man.
it is it is something on my end. They're doing some work over here. Are we back?
At the moment, yeah. Well, I
Kind of.
tell you what, though, John, I think one thing I think I would speak for both David. I think I'd speak for you and certainly myself, and that is, if you can't embody that pipes, the I've always called David. He's like he is the physical preparation extraordinaire, but it goes so far beyond just the physical part, as we've discussed so many times, and that's why if you do embody what I know now System X is embodying, and that is that's why it can carry over to not just how well you play sport, but how good a student are you? How good a business owner are you? How well you lead your family, as David was saying earlier. I think it goes so far beyond just the physical. The physical just happens to be the visible part of it. It's what people can see you doing. So I'm sorry, David. I was hoping I could do
No.
justice for David Buer while he was reconnecting.
Am I back on, guys?
Yes.
I think
Yep.
so. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Look, we're the individuals that we work with, that we're privileged to work with. Are you guys? Am I off again?
Yeah.
Yeah. You might, Dave. We might have to. Why don't you try to reconnect and see if we can get back? See if you can get back
All
on.
right. I'm gonna do the same, John. I'm gonna do the same, John. Yep.
Okay.
Get off.
Well, guys, I'll stay here and talk to everybody.
All
Or maybe I'll try to edit this
right.
part
Well,
out.
actually, I'm gonna stay right here too. I mean, I know my connection here is solid.
Your connection's fine, but
But yeah,
um,
I mean, John, you've done this long enough. I mean, you're familiar with having an impact in so many other areas if you do this thing the right way, that it is not just the physical. I mean, let's face
Yeah.
it, you train right and you come in, you have the right attitude, you have the right focus, everything about your whole day goes better. Does it not? I mean, so it
Yeah.
just so
No doubt.
happens that
I mean, I think that goes with it goes with any kind of training or discipline, as well.
absolutely,
I would say, you
absolutely.
know.
And so, you know, to find someone to, as I would hear, as you might hear Jay Schroeder say, and we've probably mentioned on this podcast as well, for if you're not willing to sacrifice to the same level you wish to achieve, you will probably end up with you better be satisfied with being just halfway satisfied
Yeah.
with
That's a
any
good way to
aspect
put
of
it.
life.
Yeah. No, that's a good way to put it. It really is. But I want to kind of going back to what he said a few minutes
Yep.
ago. I mean, I've thought about it before, and as I've gone through my own challenges, running this business and trying to go at it and deal with these ebbs
Hmm.
and flows and slow times and making bad decisions and having to pay the consequences of that, and just the natural state of running a company. One of the things that has always stuck in the back of my head was, was why isn't this type of approach out there more? And although it is now, I think obviously with the advent of social media and the influence in podcasting, I think more people out there do it. But I really do believe that a lot of coaches still want to take the easy way out with stuff, and they're not willing to commit to what this system is really about. They're more interested in entertaining the person than making them better.
Right.
And that's not for everybody. And I think it's probably led to a lot of people getting subpar results with this style of training, or even not continuing it.
Right. And
So
that's a good point. And I think, just like David was saying a minute ago, um, that to get someone to sacrifice to the level that it takes, that is so rare. And so,
yes, it is.
and I mean, so as a result, I mean, you have to again be willing to embody it yourself. Well, sometimes that's tough to do. Let's say, you have this major problem. Okay, some major problem in the business. Okay, your internet's going out or whatever. Well, how do you deal? What's happening with what we're dealing with right now. I mean, how do you deal with that? I mean, do you, um, just do you try to absorb it and I don't know. Can you really focus your mind on dealing with the problem at hand, immediately, or do you just kind of freak out? Well, I think a lot of times the way that you've prepared yourself to handle that stressor is demonstrated in the way you train. Well, I think, let's face it. If I'm going to throw something out there, very very simple, an iso extreme lunge. Okay, we've discussed it a million times on this show. Let's say that you go and you are truly you're really focusing in on the right position. You're truly in it. I mean, you're focused in on the breathing pattern. You're focusing in on, as Jay would say, the end. Um, you're really kind of in it, and then you're truly going to absolute failure. The back knee eventually touches the floor, right? You keep pulling, you keep pulling, you keep pulling. Eventually, the floor is there. I mean, that takes so much sacrifice, and it's yet at the same time, it's boring, if you will. Okay, if you want to call it that. Well, that's actually one of the sacrifices you have to make is deal with the monotony of some of these exercises in order to get the benefit out of them. It's to be able to endure something, let's face it, is quite uncomfortable. It's quite painful physically. It's also uncomfortable mentally because it requires that intense focus in order to keep that position correct and all these other things. It demands a lot from you. And so it's a whole lot easier to just kind of just get in a position and hold it for a few seconds and just say, hey, I'm doing iso extremes. So yeah, the unfortunate thing for them is that the mediocre input will give them mediocre results.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right. Well,
first
there we
and
go.
foremost, I believe that the individual needs to be honest with themselves, right? First and foremost, right? Um, what they're going to receive from whatever the training exposes them to is going to be a direct reflection of the intent and effort and concentration and discipline and awareness along the way. Um, and you see a lot of practitioners out there right now posting, ISO extremes, extreme slows, whatever you want, right? I see, a million folks now incorporating it, yet they're not incorporating any of it. They have no clue. They haven't embodied it themselves. They haven't shown any level of mastery. And I actually had a conversation recently with Jay about this. Is there truly is no mastery. It's continuous self-discovery. It's discovery of what's next, right? And if they haven't achieved a high level of execution themselves, then how do they know what's beyond that curtain or beyond that next level? And that's why it the systems in place have to be taught in a very precise, structured manner. And all things must be taken into consideration and accounted for. And there needs to be precision within the execution, because without the precision, how do you know when the compensations start to kick in? It's those precision, the precision in the execution will then allow us to then distinguish these patterns that are happening within the individual that are creating the compensation or
And make
how
no
they're
mistake,
responding.
that doesn't lie just with ISOs. That lies with all other elements of the system.
And here's the thing, it's about establishing trust with yourself first and foremost to be able to be in the appropriate position at the appropriate time, executing it and calling upon the appropriate things. And in order to do so, you have to be able to display it in certain positions that whoever the practitioner is may choose. I believe everyone on this podcast and myself, the positions that are chosen are specific to what's going to call upon the largest muscle groups, create the potential for greatest um, motor unit engagement, what is going to create the greatest metabolic response, neurological response, integrating the organs, the fascia, all the things in between there. And if we can't establish trust with the athlete to execute certain positions in a very particular way, when things are then brought, when they're exposed to additional things that maybe have more moving parts, moving pieces, a little more dynamic execution, if they can't, we can't trust them and they can't trust themselves in certain particular positions, how can we then trust them to execute the other things appropriately, right? Because movement executed with precision is recovery in motion, right? It's having the athlete understand that if they lengthen and shorten the appropriate muscles at the appropriate time in the appropriate position, they're literally going to train themselves to not only be able to recover at the same rate as they work, but they're going to unlock levels of force production and velocity and discipline and consistency within the movement and execution that otherwise wouldn't be possible. If efficiency is everything, because if the muscle is able to lengthen and shorten the agonist and the antagonist at the same time for the same amount of time, which is critical, then they're going to be able to display and showcase levels of force production and velocity, and at the same time recovery that otherwise would not be possible, as well as reducing their risk of potential injury, right? That's what's going to set them apart. And when you obviously integrate the aspects of the mental resilience, the psychological resilience, the emotional control, because like you mentioned earlier, Chris, right? It's how you do anything is how you do everything, and how you respond in stressful situations will dictate how you respond pretty much in any critical situation,
Mm.
right? If you encounter an obstacle, if you encounter a challenge, are you then overwhelmed by it? Do you start to compensate due to the stimulus that you're being exposed to, whatever that stimulus is, whether that's an argument with a spouse, or an altercation in a restaurant, or an obstacle or hurdle or a challenge that you're facing in your business. It all, comes into play, and you have to be able to be aware of the emotional aspect, the psychological aspect, right? The stimulus and the stressor, but it cannot affect your execution. Whatever that execution is set to be in order to produce the most optimal results cannot be disrupted by your emotions. Because when you wake up in the morning, it doesn't matter if you're happy, sad, angry, you still have to do what you need to do, right? You need to brush your teeth, you need to prepare yourself for the day, you need to go to work, or you need to go to school, or whatever it is you need to do. Whether you're happy or sad, that doesn't change any of it. It still needs to be done. It still needs to be taken care of. And so that needs to be applied in all aspects of life. Be aware of your emotions, but you cannot allow them to disrupt what you're trying to achieve in the process. And that's extremely critical. And what I often say when I deal with athletes, clients, whoever, uh, business people, is that the the stressors that you encounter, right? They're they're always going to be there at various levels, right? But no matter what, the execution still needs to take place in this world, in society. No one cares if you're happy, no one cares if you're sad, no one cares if you're depressed, no one cares if you're lonely, no one whatever excuse you have. The only thing that everything comes down to is whether or not you're capable of executing.
Can you
Yeah.
execute? Yes
Period.
or no?
Yeah.
Can you execute? That's all that matters as a leader of your family, as a leader of your team, as a leader of your classroom, as a leader of your business, whatever it may be, being in a relationship, any type of relationship that, whether it's personal or professional, in the end, you're judged based off of your execution, period. And in today's society, mental health is been brought into light very much, and
It
but
has, because
the
people lack the discipline because they won't execute. And that's why you have mental health struggles. You hate yourself because of the fact that you're not disciplined and you can't execute. Sorry, that gets me really fired up there. Yeah.
as it should, right?
Right.
Because like you said, it comes down to just execution,
Right.
right? And
Can you do the job?
anything
Yes or
else
no?
anything else is a crutch,
Yep.
right? Anything else is compensation, anything else is an excuse, because in the end everything comes down to
And it
execution,
looks like
period.
maybe we're getting back to a little bit more merit-based, work in our country, which is good because we need a cultural shift across the board.
Mm. Right.
And it's about merit. Can you do the job? Yes or no?
By the way, David, kind of to that point, I have had a one of the volleyball players I trained earlier this week. I can't remember the exact words she used, but something along the lines of we were doing a vertical jump and landing in an iso extreme lunge position, and she made the comment. Uh, I think she said, I feel it's so satisfying when I'm able to, get that lunge just right. And when I'm in that lunge position, I was like, she's starting to get it. This person is starting to get it. They're starting to find that the not just the physical, not just the physical execution, but what's going on with the other IPes part.
Yeah, but you again, each phase, each level prepares you for the next, right? So you can't read Fyodor Dostoevsky and think that you're going to be able to get everything that you need out of it if you weren't able to comprehend Dr. Seuss first.
It's a good way to put
And so
it.
That's a great
and
quote
so
there.
and so
You're a
so
quote machine, bro.
I I can't expose you to altitude drops or rebounds or speed Russian lunges, whatever, right? If you're not able to have some level of high level display of performance prior to that, that's going to show me that you're capable of recovering from the demands ahead.
Right.
Because the body will only give you access to what it believes it can recover from. And so if it's not prepared appropriately, then you're not going to be able to get what you're supposed to get out of that particular exercise or movement or activity. And that's what it's all about.
You're one of the only people, David, that always talks about the recovery side in the respect that you talk about it. And I think that's actually a naturally good segue into one of the questions that Chris had, which was, Chris, you want to go ahead and ask that question about the integration of additional, components to the
Yeah,
system.
absolutely.
How do you know when somebody's recovered for that before you
Yeah,
implement it?
before,
So go ahead and ask
yeah,
that
David,
question.
we've talked about the training, but clearly, on your Instagram page and others, I mean, you incorporate eventually the ARP, or like in the case of myself and John, the newbie, or external resistance. I mean, what are some of the things that you look for? When do you feel like, okay, this person is prepared to move away from an unweighted iso extreme lunge, and now, or any iso extreme for that matter, and now we're ready to increase the stimulus, add the ARP, add some external
Well,
weight and that sort of thing.
let's go back to just the reference now of the ARP and the
Mm-hmm.
newbie, right? And I've had this conversation with Colt from ARP Wave, and I'm pretty sure Jay probably has the same um, views upon this, that these modalities possess such capacity to accelerate re-education of the nervous system that in the hands of evil or those that aren't appropriately prepared to utilize these devices effectively and appropriately, what happens is they can accelerate potential for injuries. They can accelerate dysfunction and compensation if they're not incorporated appropriately at the appropriate time for the appropriate duration, right? Otherwise, what happens is you see all these folks, and damn near now every NFL, NBA, NHL team, and MLB team, and have exposure to whether it's a newbie or an ARP. They have it in all their facilities, right? And
And
in
I'm
most
I'm and I'm
cases,
hearing, and this is not coming from one of my pro guys, just so people are aware of that, that they're not getting results out of these units.
no, actually, they're getting negative results out of these units because so when they utilize it as a traditional stem, whether it's the newbie or the ARP, sure, you can potentially enhance some recovery, blood flow, circulate, whatever, right? But when they're integrated within the actual therapies, in in most cases, the proper cues from the practitioner aren't given to the athlete or the patient. And what happens is, in the process of integrating these devices, these modalities, they may create some sort of temporary band aid for that individual. But in the end, they're creating worse compensation patterns that potentially lead to even greater or more catastrophic injuries down the road. So it's critical of the practitioner to have a tremendous amount of knowledge and experience with these devices in the application, and to integrate them appropriately and be highly aware of the response of the individual if they are actually taking the cues that are given and responding appropriately, or are they just doing whatever they naturally did to get them into the situation that they're in right now. And they're actually not re educating the nervous system, but what they're doing is they're creating even greater foundation for the compensation patterns that they already had, which is going to lead to worse performance down the road or potential risk of injury, slower rate of recovery. And you, John, you touched on the recovery aspect, a moment ago. And people think that recovery is cold plunges and saunas and supplements and their diet, um, and and the ARP or the newbie, right? And it's not that, right? It's the preparation to be able to recover from the stimulus and the stressors that you're going to be exposed to, right? The sauna, the cold plunge, the vitamins, the supplements, they're icing on the cake, right? They're 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 not what's going to truly dictate your capacity and
They're in
ability to be
addition
able to
to,
recover.
not in place
Exactly.
of.
But that's completely null and void and not present in the industry at all. What's in the industry is you train, and then if you get hurt during training, there's physical therapy, which is completely separate from that. And then there's the recovery aspect, which is completely separate from that, which in reality, no, they're all one, just as our bodies function as a unit, right? Everything functions together. And so signals have to be sent appropriately. They have to be received appropriately. They have to be deciphered appropriately. Then the response has to be sent back appropriately. And there's a lot that goes into that. And what's happening is people are all doing it for the gram, especially nowadays, right? Or TikTok. And they're going through motions. They're exposing athletes or patients to levels of activity that they're not properly prepared for, because the practitioner themselves hasn't been properly prepared to provide the proper cues, or has the proper experience in addressing these issues themselves, or has enough of an understanding of what's supposed to take place and what's not supposed to take place in the particular situations. And so, Chris, you asked, when do you incorporate these things? And the response is when it's most appropriate, when the individual is prepared. Now, utilizing the newbie or the ARP or adding load, they're tools to assist the practitioner into creating the proper programming and re-education of that individual. And if you provide an individual and expose them to a load, let's say within one of those exercises, and that load then causes them to create compensation or to approach that activity or exercise now completely differently than what it's been designed to do. If they're resisting when they're not supposed to resist, if they're using the inappropriate muscles at the inappropriate time, then it's just it's a disservice to that athlete, and it's going to lead to difficulties. And that's a very kind of modest statement, down the road, right? The When the load should be applied, loads can be strategically applied to help an athlete or an individual have a greater understanding of what's supposed to take place if that's what you're using it for,
Right.
or that ARP or newbie, whatever modality, is helping them. Okay, we're doing search and destroy, we're looking to address and find exactly what the root cause of potential issues
Mm-hmm.
are or compensation patterns are. If you're using it to help them have a greater understanding of what muscles should be lengthening, what should be shortening in certain positions, and help them be able to send a more efficient and proficient signal at the appropriate time. But just to add those things, in most cases, is actually doing a disservice to the client or the patient or the athlete, the individual, whatever it may be. And so it should be approached in a surgical type manner. It's like that game Operation, right? You got to have a steady hand and know exactly, the appropriate way to get that piece out without hitting the sides and setting off the
Right.
buzzer, which, I'm sure a lot of kids that may be listening to this program may not even know what the hell that game is, right? We just
Yeah.
showed our
Right.
age. But the incorporation of these tools has to be extremely strategic. It's a delicate process, and it needs to be administered appropriately to get the appropriate response. And it needs to be cut off immediately if you're seeing these compensation patterns develop. And that's why the communication between the practitioner and the individual that you're working with is so critical, and it has to be a very open situation. They have to be willing to be vulnerable and honest with themselves and with you as far as what they're experiencing, what they're feeling, what they think is happening, because all of those things are critical when it comes to enhancing their well-being. And when I say enhancing their well-being, enhancing the way that they function. And however they choose to display that or express that is up to them. Because whether you're a pitcher or you're a dishwasher or a mechanic or a football player, a rugby player, a hockey player, tennis player, golfer, your elbow extends and flexes at some point. Your knee extends and flexes, right? Your hips extend, flex, whatever it may be, right? Your spine. The reality is, it's all the same. It may be on expressed or displayed on a different playing field or platform. Um, there may be using a different implement in the process. Um, it may be in a different environment, but in all those situations, it comes down to how efficient and proficient of a signal can you send, receive, and respond to. And whether with the newbie and with the ARP, you're able to send a signal that is 250 to 500 times faster than normally humanly possible. So you're able to educate or create compensation at a very, very, very high rate of speed. And if the individual isn't prepared appropriately to be able to utilize those devices, then bad things can
By
happen.
the way, just very quickly, I want to bring this thing full circle. This actually goes back when we first started recording a little bit ago, and that is so many people, so many athletes. The reason why I believe so many of them don't buy in all the way is they come into a training environment and they want to be entertained, and so
Instant
instant
gratification.
gratification. And guys, if you just listen to what David just said, the response he gave, and I kind of knew where he was going to go with this, which is why I asked the question. It wasn't to get a specific answer. It was really to get everyone to understand that training has to be, if it's not done correctly, it's bad. It's going to create a problem. If we give the wrong stimulus at the wrong time, we're going to create a bigger problem than we solved. And then Then we got to undo it and then try to get back on the right track. That's the reason why we do so much of the same things over and over and over and over. And it's to get this, it's ingrained the right pattern, the right patterns done the right way with the right, with the right things going through your mind, with the right breathing patterns, all these things. So anyway, I'm sorry, David.
Um, you know, touching back on how the individual feels, right? And one of the things I express to the athletes or individuals that I'm working with, the most optimal time to train or to work on this or to re-educate is not in the most optimal setting. It's not when you've gotten 8 hours of sleep and 20 to 30% of it was deep and 20 to 30% was REM, and you've had perfect nutrition and perfect hydration and you're stress free and you're not worried about work or your classes or whatever. Anyone can perform at a high level in the perfect environment and setting. I'm more interested on how you perform when maybe you are under a little bit of stress, when you didn't get as much sleep as you would like for consecutive days, when your nutrition isn't optimal.
But
That's
David,
when I'm concerned about how you perform.
my son just had practice today. He had a 6
Mhm.
hour practice. He's got a test tomorrow, and he's got games this weekend. He can't train. It's too
No,
much
no,
on
no,
him.
no, 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 no. Your son is living life. That's life, right? And you have to be able to recover from the demands that you're going to be exposed to,
But how is you
right?
putting him through a workout going to help him recover?
Because we're preparing him to recover from the stress that he's going to be exposed to, right? You have to expose yourself. You have to expose yourself to the poison.
Right.
Otherwise,
Well, sorry
a
guys,
little.
the phone is ringing and I can't figure out how to turn the volume down. So, audience, you guys are just gonna have to listen to it.
All right, let's go.
Keep going, keep going.
All right. But the reality is, we have to figure out how to function at the most optimal levels when we're not functioning at the most optimal level, right? When all things aren't perfect, right? When our nutrition isn't at its best, when our stress levels aren't at their best, that's when it's most critical because that's life. That's that's more like reality. That's the reality that you'll be living in, and that's the reality that you'll have to perform in. That's the reality that you'll have to express and display whatever it is that you're looking to express and display at an extremely high level. And you can't control all these other variables. All you can control is how you respond to them.
Right. That's almost a metaphor for the whole uh, recording thing today.
Mhm.
you know,
So,
which
hey, Chris, I know you had one more thing you wanted to ask David. We've got about 10 minutes here, and then we're on a pretty tight time schedule
yeah,
today,
I mean
guys.
that was the
Um,
main one was really, and again, Dave, that was because I sort of knew how you were going to respond, and I wanted a lot of my athletes to hear that of the whys. Let's face it. Here's the whys.
Especially right now as spring sports are kicking up. Like I think, me playing devil's advocate right there, David, it goes into what Chris was saying was you're getting a lot of that right now. Kids can't train, they can't work out because they've got too much on their plate right now. So I thought it was very beneficial for people to hear what you have to say about that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, as a parent, right? As a parent, your job is to prepare your child for the demands that they're going to be exposed to. Period. Period. That's priority one as a parent. That's what love is. That's what care is. Care isn't, oh, come here, let me give you a hug. You're going to be okay. I'll help you out. No, it's preparing them for the demands, not of, the test that's coming up and then the game that's coming up. It's life and all the life that's going to be lived ahead of you. right? And preparing you for those obstacles and challenges. That's priority one, because football, baseball, basketball, whatever sport it is, that's that's temporary, right? That's just a small piece in the big puzzle, right? And if you can figure out how to optimize and create, put yourself in a position to be able to be most successful in any situation or scenario, then you'll be able to apply that however you choose. And Jay likes to talk about, you know, whether you're a rock climber or a poet or a writer or a teacher or stock, it doesn't matter. It's however you choose to display whatever it is that you have inside of you. But in order for you to be able to display it at a high level, the reality is you're only going to display it at the level in which you're willing to sacrifice for and are prepared to recover from. Because in the process of you achieving this great feat, if you destroyed yourself in the process and aren't capable of recovering from it, then what's the point, right? You're not able to truly reap the rewards of it and capitalize off of it, capitalize from it. And then you're dealing with the repercussions and side effects associated with it, because everything has a side effect.
Yeah, it's like somebody who performs something at an extremely high level once. They do
Yeah.
it once and that's it. It's like, okay, where was that greatness? Okay, where did it come from? But okay, now where's it again? So
And let's take it to an extreme. In the process of performing or executing whatever this great feat was, you're now handicapped the rest of your life because you weren't prepared for the demands associated or the side effects associated with it. What the hell is the
right,
point?
yeah,
Right? And that's an extreme case, but the reality is, if you're not prepared to recover from those demands, if you're not prepared for those demands, then it's going to take a toll on you. And that toll is then going to have a domino, a ripple effect in all aspects of your life.
right. And that, by the way, just
Hey,
I'm sorry, John. I know we get some.
no,
No,
go
I was
ahead.
just
What were
thinking
you
that
gonna say?
one of the first thing, David, as you're talking, the first thing that pops in my mind is, you know, a, a parent whose kids, they want they're 15 years old and they want them throwing 90. John, I know you've seen that. It's like,
Yeah,
okay,
a few
if we
times.
try to get there too soon, it might, even if it's physically possible, are you going to be able to, are you ever going to be able to recover from that when this person's not prepared? I don't think so. So anyway, that's the first thing
And
popped in my
and
head.
one of the things that in touching on that, this touches on this very much. If you cannot hop out of bed at 1:17 a.m. or 3:43 a.m. or during your lunch break at work or lunch break at school or between periods at school, or just in the middle of the mall, if you can't execute a 5 minute extreme lunge or extreme wall squat or extreme push up on command every single time over and over, and you finish that set and you repeat it again. If you cannot do that over and over and over and over, then you truly don't have command of yourself and your tools and your capabilities, because you need to be able to display that efficiency and proficiency anytime, every time. And if you can't figure it out, then you're not prepared to then encounter the next phase or the next level. Because if I can't trust you to be able to execute in any situation or scenario appropriately, then why would I expose you to something that demands more when you haven't shown me the capacity to be able to recover from what it is that we're working on right now? Why? Because we want instant gratification. We want it to be fun. We don't want it to be boring. But, you know, um, growth is not possible in the presence of comfort. And in today's day and age, and this is something that I do with specifically with younger kids when parents bring them in, um, we're such an instant access society. We have so much information that's accessible now and coming at us, and so much stimulus that just having a child stand against the wall in a very precise position with their head in a position, with their shoulders in a position, their arms, their legs, their feet, looking at one particular point on the wall across the room, focusing on a very precise breathing pattern for a period of, let's say, 10 minutes. That's incredibly difficult for these young these young people nowadays. And then in most cases, they won't be able to execute that, right? So if you can't just stand and breathe, which are very basic um, parts of everyday life at a high level, then how are you going to execute a lunge or a jump or a bound or a sprint with the precision and the attention to details and the capacity for the consistent and efficient execution? If you can't do something as simple as that, if you don't have enough discipline, control, and awareness and patience in order to execute something very simple as standing and breathing and observing at a basic level, because I would consider that to be very basic. Just being able to maintain a particular breathing pattern while standing in an erect position and observing a particular object for a period of time and not being distracted by anything else in the room.
It's a tall order these days. But I agree with the message. Um, I agree with the message, and I think it's something that people need to continue to take to heart, especially coaches that are working with kids, because we all do, and I know how difficult it is, myself included, to get sucked into the trap of we got to entertain these kids. We've got to do what's right by them as well. But guys, that's going to wrap things up for today. But don't leave yet. I do have one little announcement I want to make here. I'll make it public here. So prior to the show, we were talking about the three of us getting together. We all live in fairly close proximity to each other, guys, and obviously we know that David's a fan favorite. So we were talking about getting together again and maybe doing a live show. Well, our hosting platform has actually incorporated, I believe, live phone calls and also live streaming. So I'm going to make the announcement now, guys, that if you get out and you share this show more than any other show that we've put out there, then you know what? When the three of us get together, we'll try to do a live show for y'all with with Chris, David, and myself, and get you guys to call in if that technology is in fact working on this thing. But if nothing else, we'll do a live show and make sure you guys are included in it. So there's the announcement and surprise for you. And I think Dave is going to be on a couple more times.
Yep.
I think we might have a few other guests coming on as well. And
Now we got to make it happen.
Yeah, we got to make it happen. So I might edit this out if I check the thing and it says that the live calls aren't available yet. I thought they were coming, but now, guys, get out there, share the show as always. David, appreciate
Thanks
you
again,
coming
Dave.
on, man. It's always great to talk to you. Guys, get out there, do your job.